Rishita, and welcome along to our episode today. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm doing very well, thank you. It's a rainy day in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, but regardless, it's rejuvenating and refreshing. So I'm doing very well, thank you.
Good to hear. Rishita, I think we can dive right in. And there's one thing that I would love to start with, and that is, I saw that you mentioned it somewhere, that you chose HR on purpose. And in your LinkedIn bio, you have this really great statement that says, I chose HR on purpose 14 years ago. I didn't fall into it or get stuck in it. And I think we both know that a lot of people who work in this industry didn't necessarily choose it from the start. So what has made you embark on this journey?
That's right. Thank you. It's more than 14 years now. So actually, mental note, I need to go and revisit that. But ultimately, it all started when I was studying for my bachelor's degree. And I did psychology for university. And one of the modules was organizational psychology. And it captivated me from the moment I started to the moment I finished. And what really interested me was it was really about people, the dynamics of people, their relationship with self, with others. And that's what work is all about. It's not just about how we collaborate within a team, how we work with each other, but ultimately that stems, and the root cause of how we relate to others is how we relate with ourselves as well. So that was for me really, really interesting. And the fact that I did psychology and then organizational psychology really brought the two together for me. And I felt that in one of the ways in which I can take this and bring this into my life a bit more was working within HR in organizations. So it was a conscious and deliberate effort. And whilst I was still studying, I reached out to lots of companies to see whether I can do an internship in HR to really understand a bit more what is it that I'm getting myself into? What does that mean? And I got an internship in my first year with Adecco, and I was supporting the HR department, the headquarters, in the various initiatives that they're doing. That was a starting point, really. And that was in the early 2000s. And that was it. That was once in, never out.
Yes, you caught the bug, Rishita. That's awesome. Great to hear someone, on the podcast who's so passionate about what they're doing. And we just love having conversations with people like you who are doing work that they're passionate about. Today on the episode, Rishita, we're really going to talk about HR's role in transforming an organization and specifically in 2021. It sounds like you have a real vision for HR in terms of believing that there's a better way to work and live, and that the current way of doing business is not fit for today's environment. You know, we've just been through COVID. We're still in it in a lot of places around the world. For you, what in particular isn't working right now?
I mean, going back to sort of just COVID, I mean, in the past year, burnout signs have increased by 33%, worldwide. Before that, we see a global employee engagement level at less than 15%. Yet organizations seem to spend roughly $720 million a year on employee engagement initiatives. Next to that, we see 1,615 million people suffering from depression and anxiety worldwide, which is costing roughly in loss of production about $1 trillion a year on loss of productivity. So something is certainly not working, and it's this chicken and egg. We're constantly fighting, but nothing is really happening. We spend a lot of time and money on these all engagement initiatives and efforts. But we don't see anything really moving. And it seems that we're not really trying to dig deeper and find out what is at the root cause of all of this. And all these chief wellness officers in organizations, for me, that's just a plaster. We're trying to address something at the surface, but not really go deeper. And it seems that somewhere along the way, organizations have forgotten their responsibility towards human life and human value. And there is a very strong correlation between creating environments that provide happy and healthy environment for our employees with having a sense of satisfaction in our personal lives, how we show up for our families and how we feel about life in general. And it's a boomerang that comes straight back to organizations, in terms of effective, productive, successful, empowered, and high performing individuals. So what kind of environment are we creating in organizations that are basically allowing us to show up fully as who we are. We're one human being. We're one whole being. And we can no longer expect our employees to sort of put on a persona or take on a mask when we come into work or when we leave work. We're one. So we need to embrace and we need to manage the whole.
Mm-hmm. I'm interested to know as well, Rishita, have you seen that perspective shift during COVID or the last year and a half from employers or companies you work with?
Some of them, yes. Some of them for sure have. Some of them desperately want to, but don't know how to. And some, I have seen that, I've seen various memos and have conversations with a few others who've said, who have communicated openly that, we've seen that we can work differently. We've seen that we can work remotely, but we still want everybody back in the office when it's safe to do so. So, and I always say that, the level of, the level of how an organization operates is only as high as the level of consciousness of its leader. So you can't demand more from a leader or leadership than what they can give you.
Yeah. Rishita, we're going to touch on as to how organizations can do something about this in a little bit. I was just following what you said, and I had a question that came up as well, because you said, so when we see, for instance, a chief wellness officer or these kind of people, and it's a bit like a plaster, and it's not necessarily attacking the root causes. Can you maybe share some of these root causes? I imagine they can be different for different kinds of organizations, but perhaps you can give a few examples.
So I guess what you said is right. It's different for every organization, and it's different for every demographic and every person that works in an organization. The key here is to really understand, who do we have that works for us right now? We have at certain points 4 different demographics under one roof, and they each have their own issues in their life. They are each in their own journey, and their needs, their problems, their desires, their motivations are very different from one another. And what happens in organizations is that we tend to apply a one-size-fits-all approach because we need standardization. We need, so to speak, effectiveness. We want to be able to measure, and we want to have a dashboard. And that means that we need to standardize. We need to ensure that we have one measure for everything. And we then trying to fit everybody into these boxes. And it sometimes goes completely against who they are as individuals and what they need in their life at that point. Like I said, we're one human being. We're one whole being. And actually, we need to move away from this approach of one size fits all to actually understanding who we have. Do some persona mapping. I mean, that is one of the easiest and best ways to find out who works for you. Find out, involve your marketing department, your customer experience department, and help them help you find out who works for you. Who are your personas? Where are they in their journey? Where are they in their journey, in their work? And what help do they need from you? What are their pains and their gains? And solve for that. That's getting to the root cause of the issue.
Yeah, very interesting. And I like also how you say here that HR can actually ask for help, for instance, from a customer experience department or a marketing department, because indeed these kind of departments often have much more experience already with persona mapping. So I like how this is very collaborative as an approach. And so then now, as I just mentioned already, we'd like to touch as well a little bit on the how. So what we've definitely, I think, have seen now is that for many organizations, really, they need to rethink their HR practices. Some have already started doing that, others not so much yet, but it's time to start doing that. And that means that it's also time for many organizations to transform. That is a big undertaking. So as an organization, where do you get started? Who should launch the transformation initiative? Maybe, Rishita, you can give an example from your experience as to how to do this.
So transformation sounds like a really big word, and it can be quite scary, right? But anything that involves change is a transformation. It can be big, it can be really small, but it's still a transformation because it requires a change. And ultimately, when it comes to change in organizations, it's really simple. It's all about people. And you can only achieve organizational change if you manage to bring people along one at a time. And it's about really getting granular on that. And if you can't bring people along, and if you can't explain the why now, what are the risks of not doing it? What's in it for me? And what are the benefits? What problem of mine are you solving? it's going to be very difficult to realize the benefits of a change. And change can be for very multiple reasons. It could be from a HR perspective. I'm working with a client who's changing the way that they internally operate and how they organize themselves to be able to meet the needs of their customers. And that could be employees, of course, better. And other clients we work on actually helping the business create a change. And how are we then supporting in terms of learning and development initiatives, or how are we enabling certain things to come into place with looking at processes, reviewing our processes, and the structure. So it means different things. And from a HR perspective, where I see the biggest value and benefit as a function as we move forward is to really going out to the business and understanding what is it that they need from us, not in HR terms, not what we want to do and what it means for us, but where is the impact? Right. So not about measuring how fast we can fill a vacancy, but is how fast is this person adding impact or being productive in the business? And what does that actually mean? So what is that we need to do to enable this to happen at the, faster or whatever it is that it is? So it's about having the right metrics to measure our impact. And the starting point is to really go to the business and understand what is it that you need from us? Where can we add value? Where do we make impact? And go to the employees and do the same. Go to managers. Most likely HR has 3 to 4 different audiences that we service. And again, the one size fits all approach doesn't work. Our senior leaders need one type of help from us and one type of support. So do our managers. So do employees. So do trainees and whatever else. So find out, segment our population, our audience, and really create a targeted approach to what they need. And likely you will be working on several different transformations or changes that they need. But a great place to start is there. Who is your audience, actually? Who are you servicing in the business? And what do they need from you?
Yes, love that, Rishita. You're really speaking to me as a marketer right now with this talk about personas and everything. It's brilliant. I feel like you're speaking my language. And I love that perspective, even from an HR perspective of thinking, who is the audience and how do we help them? And it's not a one size fits all thing. Brilliant perspectives. I want to just hone in there on the part you talked about business impact and HR really focusing on business impact for a moment. I wonder if you could speak to us a little bit about, I know you mentioned hiring, maybe time to hire there as a metric that HR often uses. Is there any other areas within HR that HR really needs to focus on business impact as a priority? Is there maybe 1 or 2 areas you could speak to there within the broad scope of HR?
I feel like, again, that really depends on the business and what their business needs from you. There's a lot of change happening right now. There's an evolution, right, in the world of work. And again, I feel like often our strategy is behind closed doors, and we base it on where we think we need to add value, right? So we create our own leadership programs. So that is one aspect in which I think we need to go to the business and it's actually find out what is it our people managers are needing from us in order to do their jobs more effectively. So we don't often tend to pay much attention to our people managers, and we're creating after senior leadership development programs. So I see a sort of a big disconnect and a big opportunity here actually as well, especially as we come back from COVID, because who is the person that has the highest influence over the employee experience is actually a direct supervisor or a people manager. It's not HR. It's not the senior leader. So how are we actually enabling the effectiveness of these people managers to actually coach and lead employees? Because their role is changing. The role of the manager is changing, and it's becoming less of a do as I say, to more of a coaching, more of an advocate, more of a liaison, more of a communicator. And this is where I feel that we need to, we could really, there's a big opportunity for HR to really make some impact where it matters most. Yeah.
For sure. And that's actually a super interesting point, because we've been really focusing on that the last few months at Talentsoft, even in our marketing and on the podcast, is the changing role of the manager, and the sense that what's expected of managers is shifting so much in 2021. Do you have a sense, maybe from the HR perspective, how HR can even work with managers? Like, what does that relationship look like? As you mentioned, like that relationship manager-employee is so important. How can the HR team really support that practically?
I see HR as a coach, actually, and as a mediator. HR is actually close to the business, to the employees. It's close to the managers, and it's actually bringing them together. And it's actually helping managers become better coaches, and also bridging the gap between employees and managers. I see that role really coming up for HR and becoming very valuable.
For sure. Okay, so shifting tack a little bit, Rishita, we wanted to focus a little bit on a framework that we know that you've sort of worked with and talked about a little bit. So it's a transformation framework with three focus areas: structure, culture, and strategy. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you use this framework?
Mm-hmm. So again, as I said earlier, when it comes to transformation or change, it's all about people. When it comes to people, what is it that we're asking of them? We're asking for them to understand what a new strategy means for them. So why now? Why this? What's in it for me? So that's the strategy element of it. We're asking them to be inspired by it enough to modify their behaviors and habits to be able to deliver on it. That's the cultural element. How are we enabling this to come together? And then we also need to be able to enable them to make it happen. So that's the structure aspect of it. So the processes, the systems. So as you see that everything kind of, fits into one. This is very simplistic. There are a lot more variations to this, but if we kind of look at the main elements that the other things kind of feed into is these three, and they are and they work together. And a change in one has a ripple effect on the others. And it's time in organizations we start to see the end-to-end value stream of our processes, of the things that we do, and how when we need to change one, we need to see what is the impact on the others and how do we enable them? How do we deal with the constraints and remove them to make what we want to happen into a reality so that it's adopted and it's used? And ultimately, the next thing is, how is it sustained?
Yeah. And so when it comes to this, Rishita, I mean, this is basically, this is also very much linked to change management, right? Because first you have to make sure that people understand why now, what's in it for them, and all these things. And then you get started at some point. It's a big change because, as you said, people have to adapt or change their behavior. Now, when it comes to this, what are some of the common pitfalls?
Common pitfalls for the adaptation of behaviors is a number of things. One is that they don't understand the why and the what's in it for me. And they don't understand why this is important, not from a personal perspective and also from a business perspective. So what are the risks? The next thing is that we have not given enough time to build that desire, right? It's for them to say, okay, I want to step in through this door. So I want to change and I want to do this in a different way. I want to be part of this for a reason. So I get it and I want it. So have we built enough desire? And that's very much linked to the awareness. And then it's about the fact that how are we equipping our people with the knowledge that they need to make that change happen? So that's really when it comes to, that's where HR comes in with training and development. And then, but next to that, it's not just enough that you train people, but it's about how are we making them proficient, in these new skills, in these new behaviors, and we all know the 70-20-10 model, but this is where that 20% really kicks in. And where the value is in the coaching, the peer-to-peer. So it's really about honing in on those skills, becoming proficient, getting better, supportive managers, supportive peers in doing that. And ultimately then where it goes wrong is the fact that we're not having managers or leaders who fulfill their role as resistance manager and coach. So are we saying as managers, this is important that you do this. It's important that you go to the training. It's important that you start working in this way. It's important that I model the right behaviors as a manager. So are we actually facilitating this desired change of behavior? That's where often the times it goes wrong is there, because when push comes to shove, and we need to invest time in working differently, and there's a little bit of lack of productivity probably or loss, maybe that's part of the process. When you are in transition, how are we supporting our employees through the transition journey? And that's where sometimes I find that it goes wrong. So,
yeah, I have one other thing that I was thinking of when I heard you speak, actually, Rishita, here, because just before you mentioned as well, how can you, in the long run, sustain a certain change? How you make sure that indeed it's a lasting thing? Do you have any perhaps advice on that?
Sustainability ultimately comes down to one thing. What is it that we're reinforcing? And it's about reinforcing the right habits. It's anchoring the habits onto something. So what is it that we're anchoring new habits on? How is it that we're reinforcing it? How is it that we are enabling employees to do it? So A, what are the constraints? Remove them. B, how are we incentivize you to do that? And it could be recognition, could be also compensation. There are a variety of ways in which we can reinforce the new habits. But ultimately, when it comes to habits, it's also about keeping a check on whether that's also sustainable in the long run. Because a lot of the times we create and change habits, and it works in the beginning, right? Because it's fresh, energy is fresh, the attention is there. But actually, how are we going to sustain this in the long run? And that's really what's really important, is to measure the outcomes. And that doesn't happen when you go live. It happens a month or 2 months or 3 months later when you look at the outcomes. And the only way we find out, and how we find out we're doing well, is by having feedback loops. It's consistently checking, going back to our employees and seeing how is it working, what is not working, what do we need to change. And again, the demographic changes comes here again. When we went live, when we deployed, we had a set of people in the organization. How has it changed since then? And what is it the support that these set of people need right now in order to continue this? Because you lose a bit of when people leave, when they come and go, when they change positions, the energy of the workplace also changes, and you gain new things and you lose others. And you need to be able to continually rebalance where you are and the effort of your initiative.
Yeah, if I can just come back onto what you were saying earlier, I think it's a theme I'm hearing come through, even this answer you had around sustaining this change is like, I love it. It's like coming back to the why, and like people need to understand the why behind a change, right? And the transformation. It's like, unless they understand that, it's going to be difficult to get them on board. And for a true transformation, it takes everyone being on board. So I think I really love that perspective. Just wanted to dive into what you said around desire as well. So kind of ensuring people have a desire to change. That's a really cool point. Do you have anything else to say on that? Like how do you actually know when people have a desire, or they're just pretending to have a desire?
It's very simple. Invite them to be on this change journey with you. It's about experimenting and co-creating together. That's how you create the desire, is to say, hey, this is where we want to go. This is our North Star. This is what we want to see at the end. This is what we have in mind already. What else could we be doing? Or what else do we need to do in order to help us get there? Because if you can't bring them along in this journey, and those are the people who need to be behaving, acting, or working differently, it's going to be difficult. So that's how you create desire. You create desire by allowing people to co-create and experiment together with you.
Nice. There are so many elements I really love in this, to be honest. There's the fact that it keeps going back to the why, as Joe said, but there's the fact that it keeps going back as well to that every person is different. And that is something that we really, really, really need to be so conscious about. And then there's this co-creation element as well, which I really love. And we talk about that a lot as well. Also within Talentsoft. So there are all of these elements that I think are really amazing to hear about. I'm not really sure now, actually, Joe, if it's me or if it's you that was supposed to talk.
Well, I think we sort of started freestyling there for a little while. Usually we have prepared questions, but this conversation was just flowing.
Yeah, and we did still, we had questions prepared still, but indeed it was, the conversation was just going.
I mean, I can even actually add something onto that. In one of the things is the fact that we often in organizations expect employees to understand, right? Which is, it's kind of makes sense, right? As leaders, we kind of think, oh, well, but it's clear, isn't it obvious? We expect them to just understand. And that's just wrong-headed at its core, because actually people don't just understand. So expect resistance and plan for it. And often I say also, don't wait for the resistance to come up. Think about it in advance and mitigate for it, because that is your best strategy, is to say, okay, where would the resistance be? And that's why when we invite these employees to these sessions to work with you to co-create, already ask what are likelihood, what is the resistance going to be like? Where, why, how, and start mitigating for that. You're never going to have a resistance-free change, and you're never going to appease every single person. but but it's about that mass, so how, are we mitigating for the majority up front, which means that we have a better chance of having a future state that meets our objectives, as opposed to what's called a Swiss cheese type of end result full of holes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and perhaps having, like you were saying earlier, that kind of segmentation or that persona approach, having an understanding from the beginning of a change project or transformation that different groups of people may have different kinds of challenges with a change. And yeah, I think that will give you a good head start in kind of mitigating that or dealing with that. Very good point. I think one question that you've probably touched on a couple of times here already, but would be great to just sort of sum up. And we're kind of bringing this conversation towards an end. We may just have a couple more questions. Would be kind of like, if we're talking about HR transformation or HR transforming the organization, how would you know if you'd been successful? How would you measure success?
Well, success is, it depends what success means for you as an organization. So success means very different things to different organizations. But success for me, so you have a technical side of success and you have a people side, so a process and people. Your process and your project is whether you've delivered on your objectives, delivered on time and, and money and budget, etc. But then you've got the people side of success. And that basically is really about, have we involved them enough in this journey? Do they feel comfortable? Are they enabled? Are they working in a feeling of flow? Are they supported? Do they know where they're going? And actually go and ask them what success means for them, actually, because that's what it's about. Are we fulfilling the needs and the desires of our workforce and of our business? They got to come together. So is our business thriving? Are our people thriving? And we need to make sure that these two come together. And the only way we know that is if we ask what that is and what that looks like. Going to the source, going back to the source. But look at your data, not a lagging indicator, but of leading indicators. Really look at that. What does that look like? What do we want to see in our workforce? And keep the lines of communication open. I don't think we do that often and enough. We don't often actually seek to understand first before being understood. And that often, just that one dialogue, that one conversation seeking to understand will inform so many of our decisions and initiatives going forward.
That's another great thing, that what you just said, we don't often seek to understand before being understood. I think that's very true as well. And there's one last thing that I was wondering about, Rishita. I think I already know the answer, but still, when we talk about this and this whole process, then I think it would be a common thing to assume, but transformation actually it's never really done, is it? Because it's constantly evolving. As you said, there will be new people coming in, there will be other people leaving, and so this will bring new things, other things will go. So are you actually ever done as an organization?
I don't think so. If you ask me, I don't think we're ever done. It's we now see emergent strategy as becoming business strategy is emergent. We're actually no longer doing a strategy a year or 2 years or 5 years in advance, but we really listen and gauge what's happening, in the market. We see evolutionary purpose, which means actually, as I don't know whether you have that, but my purpose seems to have shifted a few times. I mean, generally, yeah, there is that red thread. But depending on where I am in my life and my journey, what's happened, my purpose seems to shift. So, we now see the evolutionary purpose also coming along. And this is where organizations need to be really, attuned to, is the fact that our purpose as an organization will evolve. So will the purpose of our employees. And the most important thing here is to ensure that they kind of come together. Because if we can do that, then we can deal with things and we can fight the fires and the battles, as we go along. And I think that's what's really important, is to connect, is to bring the purpose side of things together.
And perhaps, Rishita, just to finish, what we love to do to finish each of our episodes is try to sort of sum up the key points of the episode by leaving our listeners with a challenge. So if you had to boil it all down to one challenge for those HR people listening in, or managers even listening in, what would that be from today's episode?
I think one thing that will will incorporate all of the things we've just talked about, would be to create a HR brand persona and have the right people in that room with you. And by that, I mean have everybody, your customers, the employees, managers, leaders, maybe external people. Who is it that you interact with on a day-to-day basis? Who are your stakeholders as HR? And create your HR brand persona. And that really is about, what is it that you're all about? What service do you deliver? What do you want to be saying, doing? What are your values? What are you delivering? How do you want to be perceived? What are you enabling? And that will really mean that you'll have the conversations. You'll start having the conversations with the business and with employees as to what is it that you need to fulfill for employees, for the business, for managers, and for all your stakeholders. So this is my invitation.
Fantastic having you here, Rishita. Thanks again. Just wanted to leave all of the listeners with a final note that if you have enjoyed this episode, we'd love to invite you to subscribe, leave a review, share it with a friend. We always appreciate that. Otherwise, we're going to see you again next week for another great episode of the Ins and Outs of Work. Bye.